7,000 years ago, in a quiet farming village, something happened that we still can't fully explain. Beneath a long ditch at the edge of the settlement, archaeologists uncovered the remains of at least 77 people, and almost every single one of them was missing its skull. No heads, just bodies lying in an unusual ditch, resting on or near one another at the edge of a village where families once lived, farmed, and raised children. This was not a normal cemetery. Was this violence? A ritual? A way of remembering the dead? The truth is, no one knows for certain. But what these bones reveal about the first farmers of Europe is stranger and more human than you might expect. To understand this mystery, we have to travel to a place called Vráble in what is now southwest Slovakia. Today, it looks like an ordinary field. But between roughly 5,250 and 4,950 BC, this was one of the largest and most important settlements of its time. It belonged to a people archaeologists call the Linear Pottery culture, some of the very first farmers in Central Europe, communities that were slowly leaving behind the older hunter-gatherer way of life and settling down to grow crops and keep animals. This was no small camp. Over the years, researchers from Kiel University in Germany and the Slovak Academy of Sciences mapped out the traces of more than 300 houses spread across 3 separate neighborhoods. Hundreds of people may have lived here at its peak, and one of those neighborhoods was surrounded by something unusual, a long ditch, nearly a mile in length, that seems to have marked a boundary around the community, a line between inside and outside, between us and them. For years, the ditch was just part of the landscape, but when archaeologists began carefully excavating it, they found something they did not expect: human remains. Not one or two, but many, lying along the bottom of the ditch, close to the entrance of the settlement. As they kept digging, the number grew. A few bodies at first, then a much larger group, some resting in unusual positions, on or near one another. In total, the remains of at least 77 individuals gathered in the same stretch of ditch. And this was not a tidy, ordered graveyard. It was something far harder to explain. And then came the detail that stopped everyone. Almost none of them had a head. Out of all these people, only a single skeleton still had its skull, and it belonged to a child. Every other body had ended up in that ditch without its head. Imagine standing at the edge of that trench, brushing away 7,000 years of soil, and slowly realizing that the skulls were simply gone. So what did the archaeologists actually find, and what does it really tell us? This is where we have to be careful and honest, because the bones themselves are real evidence, but the story behind them is still uncertain and still being debated today. On some of the neck bones, researchers reported fine cut marks that may have been left by sharp stone tools. If that reading is correct, it could mean the skulls were removed deliberately, rather than lost by accident over time. But even that is not the whole answer, because a cut mark can tell us that something was done, without telling us why it was done. And that why is exactly where the honesty has to begin. The marks alone do not tell us the mood of the moment, or who these people were to one another, or what anyone was feeling. Archaeologists are still weighing what these traces mean, and they are careful not to jump to a single story. What looks deliberate is not automatically peaceful and not automatically violent. It simply tells us that human hands were involved in a place that was never an ordinary burial ground. So what could explain it? Here, the experts offer several possible explanations, and they are careful to call them possibilities, not conclusions. One idea is that the head held special meaning for this community. In many early societies, the head was seen as the seat of a person's identity, their very self. Separating and keeping the skull might have been a way of holding on to that person, even after death. We know that other Neolithic communities, far from Slovakia, did treat human skulls in special ways, retrieving them, keeping them, returning to them long after death.
A second possibility the researchers raise is that the removal of heads was connected to conflict or tension between groups, the idea that a head could carry meaning tied to outsiders or rivals. And a third possibility is simpler and quieter, that the skulls were separated and stored somewhere else entirely, in a place we have not yet found, perhaps beneath one of the houses, perhaps perhaps in another part of the ditch, still waiting to be uncovered. And that brings us to the most important part of this story, the part that separates real archaeology from a good guess. Because here is what the evidence cannot prove. It cannot tell us that these people were murdered. It cannot prove a war, an execution, or a sacrifice. We do not know if they died naturally, one by one over many years, or together. We don't know whether the head removal happened as part of grief and love, or fear and violence, or something in between that we simply don't have a word for. The single most revealing discovery, the missing skulls themselves, has never been found. And until they are, the true meaning of this place remains open. It's tempting to fill that silence with something dramatic, but the researchers themselves resist it. What they see instead is a community whose relationship with death was complex, deliberate, and worth returning to again and again. A place people came back to, not a single terrible moment frozen in time. And that is what makes this discovery so quietly powerful. We often imagine early farmers as simple people, focused only on survival, planting seeds, feeding children, staying alive through the winter. But Vrable tells a different story. These may have been people with beliefs, with ideas about the body, about identity, about what should happen to us after we're gone. Along the boundary of their world, they left behind something we still cannot fully read. That is not the behavior of people just surviving. That is the behavior of people trying to make sense of life and death, exactly as we still do today. 7,000 years later, we stand at the edge of the same ditch, asking the same questions they may have asked. Who were these people? What did the head mean to them? And where, after all this time, did the skulls finally go? Maybe one day, another careful brushstroke through the soil will give us an answer. Or maybe this village will hold on to its secret a little longer. But even in that silence, one truth remains. The people who lived here were not so different from us. They loved, they feared, and they searched for meaning, even in the face of death. And that mystery, more than any answer, is what keeps us digging.